Just try to imagine a day without Google. Really. No searching for recipes, no quick answers, no Google Maps to get us anywhere. Impossible, right?
Yeah, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't use at least one Google product every day.
Exactly. It's incredible when you think about it. This global giant, this verb we use without a second thought. It started with two guys, a dorm room, and get this, a project called Backrub. Can you imagine if that name stuck?
Backrub, it does have a certain ring to it. Not sure it would have had the same impact, though. And you're right, it all started in their dorm room. Yeah. This wasn't some fancy Stanford lab with millions of dollars in funding. They even had to borrow computer parts, which, let's be honest, anyone who's ever pulled an all-nighter for a project can relate to.
Talk about humble beginnings. Okay, so Backrub. What were they even working on?
It all comes down to this. Backlinks. You know those links you see on websites, the ones that take you to other pages?
Right, they're everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. And what Larry and Sergey, these brilliant computer science students, realized was that those links, they weren't just navigational tools. They were like clues revealing something much bigger about a website.
Clues? I'm intrigued.
Think about it. The more quality websites that link to you, the more credible you are, right? Kind of like a vote of confidence from the web itself. So Backrub was designed to analyze all those links and then, using some pretty clever algorithms, rank websites accordingly.
Wow. So while everyone else was focused on simple keywords, they were already thinking about context, about quality over quantity. That's genius.
Absolutely ahead of their time. Most search engines back then, you'd type in, say, digital marketing, and you'd get anything and everything with those two words in it. It could be a website about digital watches marketed to marketers, for all you know. Complete chaos.
Okay, now I'm really seeing why that name change was necessary. Backrub just doesn't scream organized information, does it?
Not quite. Thankfully, they landed on Google, a play on the term Google, which, if you're not familiar, is a 1 followed by 100 zeros.
A number so big, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around.
Exactly. And that perfectly captures their ambition. They weren't aiming to build just a search engine. They were after something far grander, organizing the entire world's information.
Which, back then, the internet was still this.
Yeah.
This new frontier. Right. Most people probably couldn't even fathom the sheer scale of information that was out there, let alone try to organize it.
It was a radical concept. And you're right, their ambition to even think on that scale, especially back then, well, it was bold, to say the least. Of course, not everyone immediately jumped on board.
I can imagine. Back then, talking about backlinks and algorithms, some people probably thought they were nuts, especially since they were so young.
Oh, absolutely. Getting funding, convincing people to take them seriously, it wasn't easy. They faced a lot of skepticism in those early days, but what set them apart, aside from, their sheer brilliance, was this. They didn't just get the tech. They understood that it had to be accessible, easy to use. Think about those early search portals, that clunky, cluttered.
I vaguely remember those.
Right. Well, Google. Clean, simple interface. It just made sense. People got it instantly.
That focus on user experience, on making something complex, intuitive, that's key. But they also had those technical breakthroughs too, right? The things that really made Google stand out from the crowd, even beyond the whole concept of Backrub.
Oh, absolutely. And two innovations really stand out. First, PageRank. It built on their initial idea, using a sophisticated algorithm to actually analyze the importance of backlinks, not just how many there were. And get this, it's based on this idea that every link is essentially a vote for the website it's linking to. Right. But just like in real life, not all votes are equal. A link from, say, the New York Times is going to carry a lot more weight than a link from my, cat's fan page. And PageRank takes that into account, analyzing the importance of the site giving the vote, which meant more relevant search results.
So it's like a whole web of influence, with PageRank mapping out which sites are the thought leaders in a way.
Exactly. And the second key innovation, data centers. They were pioneers in developing incredibly efficient data centers. And remember, this is a time when the internet is exploding, growing exponentially. They needed the infrastructure to keep up, to handle all that information. Without those data centers, Google simply wouldn't have been able to scale the way it did.
Makes sense. The infrastructure had to grow alongside the vision. Speaking of scaling, let's talk about 1999, a pretty pivotal year for Google. In 1999, they managed to secure a $25 million funding round, which seems almost like pocket change when you think about what Google's worth today. But back then, that was huge.
Oh, it was absolutely a turning point. It's easy to look back knowing how successful they became and think it was a sure thing. But this was the middle of the dot-com bubble. Tons of companies with big ideas and not a lot to back it up.
Right. So many companies crashing and burning.
Exactly. And I think what set Google apart was they had the groundbreaking technology, but also this very clear vision for how to make it something everyone could use. Remember, their goal wasn't just building a search engine, it was making information universally accessible and useful. Investors saw that ambition, and they saw that Larry and Sergey had the talent to actually make it happen.
And the rest, as they say, is history. Google's IPO in 2004 was a landmark moment, not just for them, but for the entire tech world. Suddenly, these two guys were billionaires. I mean, those numbers are so big, it's hard to even comprehend. But what fascinates me is what that meant for Google, the company. They suddenly had resources like never before to become more than just a search engine.
Absolutely. That's where it gets really interesting. That IPO gave them the freedom to experiment, to branch out, to acquire other companies, and that's exactly what they did. I mean, think about all the things Google does now. Gmail, Maps, Android, so many products that have become a part of our everyday lives.
That's true. It's hard to picture a world without them now.
Yeah.
But before we go down that rabbit hole of everything Google has its hands in, we have to talk about something that didn't quite work out as planned. We've talked about their successes, but even those brilliant minds make mistakes. And for Google, one of those missteps was Google+.
Yes, Google+. I remember when that launched, there was a lot of hype. A lot of people thought it would be the next big social media platform.
It never quite took off, did it?
Not really. I mean, it's tempting to just call it a failure. And to be honest, it didn't achieve the kind of social media dominance they were hoping for.
So what went wrong? Why didn't it
Wow.
catch on?
Well, there are a lot of theories floating around. Some say they were just too late to the game. Facebook had already become the go-to social network for most people. Others argue that Google Plus was just too clunky, too complicated. You know, it lacked that simplicity and user-friendliness that people expected from Google products. And then there were the privacy concerns Google Plus tried to integrate with their other services, which made some users uneasy.
So even though it didn't pan out, it sounds like there were valuable lessons learned.
Oh, for sure. You know, Google's always had this culture of experimentation. Fail fast, fail forward, as they say. They were willing to take risks, even if it meant a very public stumble. And while Google Plus might not have been a hit, it gave them insights they could use to improve other projects. For instance, it emphasized just how important simplicity and user experience really are, something they've clearly focused on in later products.
It's a good reminder that even the most successful companies, even the most innovative minds, they all make mistakes. It's how you learn and adapt that matters. Speaking of adapting and pushing boundaries, I have to ask about something I came across while prepping for our deep dive. It's a little out there. Have you ever heard of this whole Google Island thing?
Oh, you mean the rumor that Larry and Sergey have this secret island hideaway where they're developing? Well, who knows what. It's one of those internet myths that just won't die.
Exactly. And look, I'm not saying I believe it or anything, but it's interesting what it says about how people view Google and Larry and Sergey. They've achieved this almost mythical level of success. There's this air of mystery surrounding them.
It's like they've reached a level of success that seems almost unattainable, almost mythical, which I suppose, in a way, it is. And when you combine that level of achievement and wealth with technology, well, people are going to let their imaginations run wild. It's like a modern-day fairy tale.
Right. Instead of dragons and magic, though, it's algorithms and private islands.
Exactly. But instead of speculating about secret islands, how about we talk about something just as impactful, but much more grounded in reality? Larry and Sergey's philanthropy.
It's nice to shift gears for a minute from the stuff of internet legend to something as real-world and important as philanthropy. And they haven't just been writing blank checks either. It's been very intentional, focused on tackling these huge, complex issues.
Oh, absolutely. And it's really interesting to see how their personal passions connect back to their backgrounds in tech. Larry Page, for example, is really passionate about renewable energy. He sees it not just as like an environmental necessity, but as a technological challenge, which knowing Larry Page might be the most motivating way to get him on board.
Totally. He's not just into supporting existing solutions. He wants to find completely new approaches.
Exactly. And he's put his money where his mouth is, investing a ton in companies that are developing things like, you know, electric cars, flying wind turbines, even doing research into making clean energy more affordable. It's like he's taking that Google scale thinking and aiming it at some of the biggest problems facing humanity.
It's amazing to consider the impact that could have. And Sergey Brin, while also interested in renewable energy, has really become a champion for expanding internet access all over the world.
Which, when you think about it, makes perfect sense. It's a natural extension of what Google's all about. Sergey Brin truly believes that having access to information is empowering, and he's supported so many projects to bring the internet to communities that need it, from rural areas to developing countries.
It really drives home how much the world has changed, thanks in no small part to the innovations of people like them.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the algorithms, the tech side of it all. But their story, it's a human story.
It really is. It's about two guys with a really, really big idea, a ton of hard work, and yeah, a little luck along the way. It reminds us that even the most impossible seeming ideas, they can become reality.
Their journey from that dorm room to global influence, it's inspiring. It makes you wonder what's next for Google. What will it look like in 10 years, 20 years? Will they keep growing, or will some new innovation come along and completely disrupt everything?
It's hard to say for sure, but one thing I know for certain, the future of how we use information, how we interact with technology and the world around us, Google's going to be right there, front and center. And who knows, maybe someone listening to us right now will be the one to shake things up. After all, every groundbreaking idea has to start somewhere.
And that's our deep dive on Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the minds behind Google, from backrub to billions and beyond. Fascinating stuff, right?
Absolutely fascinating. It really makes you think.
It does. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another look at the people and ideas shaping our world.